So you got a job offer. The pay's better, the city's shinier, and all you have to do is uproot your entire life. Relocating for work sounds like a step up, but is it really? Let's talk about what no one tells you about moving for a job. I've moved across country 3 times. Once to reboot my life, once for work, and once for reinvention. Each time I thought I was chasing something better, and sometimes I was. But other times the cost was higher than I expected. Hey there, I'm Paige and welcome to Nerdonomic, where we talk about geeky money topics and have a lot of fun doing it. Today, I'd like to break down the real costs of relocation. So a lot of people don't necessarily think about this when they're looking at the job offer, but moving is actually really expensive in terms of dollars, time, and energy. You have the upfront expenses. You have movers, travel, deposits, short-term housing, the cost of eating out, because a lot of times you're traveling around, you're viewing apartments or touring houses. Maybe you've just renoed your kitchen and you can't cook it in anymore. True story, actually, from when I sold our house in Ohio when my husband got a job in Texas. I lived in that house while it was being shown and I could not cook at all because everything was being remodeled and renoed and looking spotless for the new people who were gonna buy it. Gosh, it's even expensive to pay to have your pets transported or things like doggy daycare, dog walkers, what have you. I was in a situation when Justin and I, when we moved from Ohio to Texas, I was up in Ohio selling the house, he was in the apartment in Texas, and he had to get flown to the company's other branch, which was in New England, for a week to do training. And he didn't know anybody yet in Texas, and we had our 2 cats, which would have been a big deal, but one of our cats was on steroids. He had an autoimmune condition for his digestive system. He had to get medication every day. It wasn't like we could just set out a bowl of kibble or anything. We later found a good pet sitter in the area that could do medical care because the cat also developed diabetes over time because of the steroids he had to be on. It did things to his blood sugar, then he needed injections, so we needed somebody medically competent for when we even went away for a day or 2. That was like $50 a day though, to do his medication, have somebody come in. And at that point we didn't know anybody. So I was selling the house in Ohio. I still had to be there. I was trying to also do stuff like get rid of our other car and wrap up some stuff with the title bureau. In Ohio, there was paperwork I had to be physically present for because the states didn't want to talk to each other. It was a whole thing. So what we did was I flew down for the week that he was actually training in New England and I house sat and took care of the cats. What we ended up doing was planning long weekends on either side, so we did get to spend a little time with each other, but I also had to fly out at weird times, like really early and really late at night in the middle of the week because we didn't want to spend a lot for flights because it was something like, I want to say the American Airlines flights from Cleveland to Dallas at that point, there was, if I sat middle seat and I went at a really terrible time, it was about $90 each way. Not cheap if you think about having to go back and forth to do that. It was direct, so that was good, but yikes. That's just one weird example, like stuff comes up all the time. There's also lost wages or PTO burn during the move. Now we were in a good situation because I worked for myself. The first time I moved cross country, I did not work for myself. I was in Maine and I was moving to Ohio. I worked remotely. Even back then I was a medical transcriptionist, but funny story, I had arranged with my employer at the time to move my job from Maine to Ohio, and they had said it was possible. They had other employees that had done that with Massachusetts and Florida. I gave them 6 months notice to do that. A couple weeks before I was supposed to move, they were like, oh, sorry, we can't. At this point, I'd already paid the movers. It was non-refundable. I already had plans. I had my housing set. And I was like, well, what? No, what am I supposed to do? They're like, yeah, it's too hard for us to work with the state of Ohio. They don't want to cooperate with somebody in Maine, like a company in Maine. Ohio decided to be this way when Florida and Massachusetts were fine. So I was like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? They're like, oh, well, cancel your move. And I was like, I can't though. Like I got housing there. I got movers set up. Like, So I worked really quickly and I found a national firm, a national transcription firm that I could work for. I literally switched employers in the middle of moving because they had done this. So that time I wasn't moving for work. I was moving because I wanted to reinvent myself. I had lived in Maine all my life and I had some friends in Ohio and I wanted a fresh start just to try it. Cleveland was nice. People were friendly there. They were extroverted, but they were down to earth. They weren't too pretentious. And it was a big city to me, but still accessible enough that I could figure it out without being too overwhelmed. So it was a really good move for me. But yeah, that was a little crazy. Thankfully, my new employer wanted me to start right away. Otherwise, I could have had some lost wages and stuff in that. Now, with the move from Ohio to Texas for Justin's job, as I mentioned, I was back in Ohio and I was working in the house. Now, the good thing is that I was running my own business by this point, so I had a lot of flexibility. It was very difficult. I was painting every room in the house. I was doing a kitchen reno. I was teaching myself things with the YouTube School of DIY and working with my realtor to get the house sold. I was putting in a lot of the sweat equity myself because Justin had already left for work. He was already in Texas at our new apartment. So I was doing my regular business stuff, and I was also had this full-time job as a handyman. It was really hard, but I did have that flexibility. Now, the problem with being a small business owner is you don't have any coverage. I didn't have any PTO. There's no PTO involved. I basically collapsed when I finally got to Dallas full-time. And I will also say that sometimes you'll run into a cost of living mismatch. I've seen this with other friends. This didn't happen as much with me because we actually we were careful about this. We checked out the cost of living of each area. But you might find that the new job pays a lot more, but if the new area is really expensive to live in, or you're suddenly going to need childcare, and childcare is very expensive, that can eat up the whole raise. Also, the tax stuff gets messy. Now, there used to be a time where moving expenses were a clear-cut tax deduction. Sadly, that is no longer the case, and moving expenses are no longer deductible for most people. And that's not even factoring in all the sneaky fees. A lot of times when you switch states, there's a whole onboarding process and a whole bunch of paperwork you have to do. There's stuff like car registration, getting your new license. Like, that's really expensive. You have to pay for that every time you switch states. And there's also stuff like new furniture, even bare bones furniture for your place, or things like neighborhood fees. You might have an HOA fee or a parking fee. So you might find that your move looks great on paper, and then you get there and you realize you are spending an extra $400 a month just to live. And that's not even talking about the psychological toll, which is real. I think this is the biggest thing for me, is the loss of social capital. So every time you move, you're starting from zero on your local friends and your networks and your family. This was particularly striking in Dallas. We knew absolutely no one in Dallas whatsoever. We had no friends or family anywhere, and it would come out in the funniest ways. We had gotten there and I was in the process of finding caretakers of various kinds. So stuff like doctor, dentist, hairdresser, vet, different kind of service professionals that you need. And I was doing pretty good. I had run into a roadblock with the dentist. So we both have dental anxiety. My husband, he doesn't like needles. He finds it physically uncomfortable, the whole process. Me, I tend to dislike the lectures. I like being taught how to do things well, but if you lecture me, I will start crying. And this has been kind of a lot of drama for some dentists. And also, it's hard to get dental work while you're crying because your sinuses. For me, it's tough because I've had to do a lot of work with my gums, a lot of periodontal stuff. I've mentioned before on the channel, I was poor for a number of years and I couldn't afford dental insurance. And there's basically a certain amount of damage to my gums that is just done. It's just a done deal now. I do the best job that I can. Never going to be as good as somebody who had health insurance, who had dental insurance all that time. It just isn't. I'm doing the best I can now. I appreciate care instructions, but I cannot turn back time. It is not an attitude thing. I was broke as a joke and fighting other battles. Anyway, Justin had found his previous dentist back in Ohio through coworkers who went there and said they were very nice. So he went to his new employer in Dallas, and literally no one had any recommendations. People just kind of griped about their dentist, and that was it. Part of that was because he was new. He had actually been recruited in there by somebody he used to work with back in Ohio, but they weren't terribly close and he didn't have connections with other people. We literally knew no one else in the area. We ended up getting involved with a local group, the Dallas Makerspace, a bunch of makers, artists. I was the volunteer coordinator, briefly the chair of digital media. I used to teach content for small business owners and content creators. A class called Social Media for Creative People was probably my most popular topic, but writing your life story was also really good since I'm a writer. Yeah, so we got involved a lot with the Dallas makerspace. But before we did that, that was very, very tricky. Additionally, there's this kind of intangible identity disruption that can happen that people don't talk enough about, where you become a new person in a new place. I sort of like that, especially in Ohio. I really like that because there's a lot of baggage from Maine, and to be honest, my family. Mainers are stoics. We don't talk about our feelings. I'm a weird Mainer. I talk about my feelings. I'm pretty open and honest. There are a lot of people in my life from then who have a lot of trauma and a lot of things that have happened they just don't talk about. And so it's a very uncomfortable place, both for people who've hurt me personally and also the inability to talk about it openly, which really bothers me. So for me, like, a rebirth was great. Moving to Texas was a bit harder because I had a good social network in Ohio. I'm still friends with people in Ohio. We maintain long distance friendships. And again, I'm out on the West Coast now, and funny thing is, our first friends here are people we knew already that moved out here as well. So that's been interesting. But kind of feeding into that, being in a new place causes decision fatigue. So like I was just saying, I had to go and shop for every single service that we needed. Something I'm doing again right now. Like, I just found my hairdresser not too long ago. But it's not just that, it's grocery stores too, social norms. You know, you have to figure everything out. You're like, okay, well, where is my X? Where is my Y? Is this one better than that one? Where if you're in one place for a while, you make those decisions early on, or maybe there's things that your friends and family have told you. Oh, you know, you're little and your mom takes you to a store and you go there and that's just where you go. You go to a new place, you have to make those decisions every time, all day for a while. That's exhausting. There's also a lot of hidden emotional labor involved in fitting in a new culture. I found that in Dallas for sure. People are more competitive, braggadocious. In Dallas, they're very aggressive drivers. I will say that's where it comes out. My friends in Dallas are the nicest people I've ever met, but a lot of people in Dallas are not very nice. Sort of a cutthroat place. People have a lot of money in that city, and they're very competitive, and yeah, they're very loud, and they're polite, but it's a different thing. Also, in general, I found in Dallas that men expected me to defer to them, which I'm a friendly person. Like, I'm chill, I'm laid back. I treat everybody pretty much equally. I don't really treat men and women differently. And in the South, that's a little unusual. It's a true story. I one time had a guy at the pottery studio I was taking some classes at walk away from me, muttering under his breath, "Yankee witch." And my best friend in Texas, who was born and raised in Texas, she loved this. She loved watching me butt heads with people. She couldn't do this. This was not the way that she was. She did not have the cojones I had, let's say. But she made me merch. She made me witch hat merch. She made me candles. She tried to take a Yankee candle and change it. Yankee Candle does a whole custom system where you can do a custom candle. She tried to order me one that said Yankee Witch, and they refused to sell it to her because they thought it was bullying. I want to say that was the reason they gave her. They thought that she was buying it to be mean to somebody or something. But so she was like, oh, heck with it. And she made me one herself. She went and printed off a specialty label and put it on, and it was amazing. It was amazing. Love that, 10 out of 10. I actually might have her on the channel because she's an accountant, and she's been working with people who are victims of a specific kind of predatory loan. She's just really funny and very different than me, and we get each other laughing. She's very smart. She's very good with money in a different way than I'm good at money, which tells you a lot about money, right? That we're both really good with money. We've made very different decisions, and we're both solid. There's no one way. Anyway, I'm thinking about having her on. We'll see. She's busy and camera shy, but she said it sounded like fun. I will say, though, that I did underestimate how disoriented I would feel moving to new places. Even just driving somewhere familiar without GPS took me months. Okay, so we talked about some of the hidden costs and some of the hidden stressors. Let's talk about when it is worth it, because I've done it multiple times. It can't be all that bad, right? And truth be told, I'm glad I did it. Here's when it's worth it. When you get a major cost of living improvement with a long-term career upside. It's no-brainer. No-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
Or if you get a better quality of life, safety, climate, family access, work-life balance. For me, finding good friends and finding a good community. I've managed to kind of take it with me as I've gone. My friends are all tech savvy, which definitely helps. Alternatively, it could be a good move because it's a stepping stone. Sometimes the move is worth it because it's a bridge to something else. We actually tend to look at our Dallas move that way. So here's how it kind of played out. I moved from Maine to Ohio. I actually didn't date Justin until after I was in Ohio. I didn't move to Ohio for him. I actually moved to Ohio for a friends group that he was part of. We were friends for a while and then we fell in love. Long story, but true. Yeah, we were friends for over a year. We were actually dating other people when we met and complaining about them to each other. It's like a rom-com. But yeah, we lived in Ohio together for about 8 years. He got the job offer in Dallas. He had been wanting to get out of Cleveland anyway. The Rust Belt economy is
well, that's putting it mildly.
Neither of us were crazy about the winters, and he had an old coworker from a few jobs ago reach out to him and ask if he wanted to come to Dallas. We ran the numbers, it made sense. Now, one of the neat things was we had our house in Cleveland. It was a small starter house that he bought right after the 2008 crash. It was not easy. We suffered for that house. We had to do all kinds of hijinks to manage to stay on our mortgage, but we were able to sell it and move to Dallas. And as part of that, we downsized considerably. We sold off a lot of our possessions or donated them. We got rid of a bunch of clutter. Like, we really streamlined. We had a 2-bedroom apartment in Dallas. It was a nice apartment. It was very sparsely furnished. We brought almost nothing with us. We got almost nothing there. We really downsized. We lived in Dallas for 4 years, and Justin ended up actually switching jobs while he was in Dallas to an all-remote firm that's actually based in a completely other state. We have never lived in this state. And at that point, we realized that we could travel full-time if we wanted to. Justin really didn't like Dallas that much. I thought there were pros and cons. I have good friends there. I like the sunshine. I didn't like the way people drove. And when we had moved to Dallas, we had 4 elderly pets. 3 of them passed away in the 4 years we were there. We just had 1 cat left, and we found out that he actually liked to travel when we did some short trips. I also lost my older sister unexpectedly. She wasn't even ill. And also my father, who was ill. He'd had cancer for a while. He'd had health problems for a while, but it was still very sad. He was a parent I was closer to. I lost 3 pets, and my sister and my father all within 2.5 years. And you know, the pandemic also happened during this time. So it was a tough time, and I was like, yeah, I want to go on a trip. We kind of were thinking of an RV originally, maybe renting it, doing some trips and stuff. And then we realized that it made more financial sense to buy one and travel around and then just have it. And that's what we did. That's actually how I started on YouTube. I have another channel, Our Moving Castle, that I started while we were living on the road full time and traveling around. And while we were doing that, we were looking for the place that we liked the best, that we wanted to live. And actually this fall, in November 2024, we bought a house in the Pacific Northwest. We tried everywhere. I liked lots of places, but this was definitely my favorite. I had a bunch of aha moments, a bunch of moments where it's like, yes, this feels right, this feels good. And it's been great. To be fair, the Dallas years made sense in a cost of living and a pay sense, but it was also a really important stepping stone, as was the RV traveling. And here's the thing, if we're looking at all these other reasons, just feeling really stuck, whether that's socially, professionally, or emotionally, can be a reason to move. That's what Maine to Ohio was about for me. I mean, that was probably my best move of all, and it wasn't for a job. It was just time to let go. And I didn't realize how heavy everything had felt until I left. Okay, so how do you decide, right? Like, this is like, let's anchor it, okay? Run your offer or your opportunity through a sanity check. Ask yourself, what's the net benefit after true cost of living differences? There are tons of calculators online. I use them for Cleveland to Dallas. Like, use them. This move here in Oregon was a little better because we were in the RV and we were able to actually live here in the RV. Before we bought the house, we stayed at a local RV park for 6 months, even before we started house hunting. Also ask yourself, is the raise real or a mirage after you run those calculations? Do you get a relocation stipend to help? That is huge. I obviously did not have a relo when I moved from Maine to Ohio. The relocation package from Ohio to Texas was mighty, and it helped considerably. I don't know that we could have done it. They were covering 6 months of our new rent while we sold our house, and we got to pocket the difference. So the fact that we sold the house faster was a big help. They paid for all our moving expenses, and I was able to submit receipts for packing supplies. And then there was an extra cash bonus on top of it. Like, it was great. They were seriously helpful. I want to say Justin had a contract where he had to work for them for like 2 years or something, a year or two. He did, but yeah. Huge deal. Ask yourself, are you moving towards something better or just escaping from something bad? I mean, escaping from something bad can be good, but if you're gonna move towards something, you wanna try to move towards something better. It kind of gets you on both ends. So if you're wrong about one or the other, you still come out ahead. And finally, could you try the location first with a visit or remote trial? So that happened for me in each of these situations. When I moved from Maine to Ohio, I had actually lived in Ohio at a friend's house for 2 weeks, about 6 months before I decided to move there. I also did another trial trip about halfway through, about 3 months in, where I was there for a week. I didn't go there sight unseen. And that's how I knew I would like it there. I would vibe there, especially because I went to Ohio during November and February. Those were the 2 times. Like, the weather was terrible. And with Ohio to Dallas, Justin had flown down to do the interview and he had gotten a feel for it. I trusted him. He has good judgment. He sent me videos and pictures. We talked about it. I did get to go down before we started moving down there. They flew me down with him another weekend and we went apartment hunting. That's when we signed our lease, and I got to see Dallas too before we were actually there, and that was also very helpful. And with the Pacific Northwest, we swung by a few different times. The first time we stayed in this area, we were here for 2 weeks. That's when I fell in love with it. We came back at a completely different time to see if we would like it, and we lived here for 6 months, parked stationary in the RV to see how it would feel before we started even house hunting, because a house is a bigger commitment than a job. Look, there's a difference between a city that looks good on Instagram and one you'd actually enjoy living in after your 3rd dentist appointment and a trip to the DMV. And it's important to tease these things out. Cities have vibes, and it's hard to get a sense until you've actually been there. At the end of the day, relocation is not just a financial decision. I mean, it is, but it's also a full life decision. It can be transformational or a trap. If you're feeling stuck, moving can change everything. But if you're hoping a new zip code will magically solve all your problems, it won't. Ask me how I know. Anyway, it's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.